Hey folks, so this is a PT Cruiser. This is a 2006. I'm just going to show you real quick. It's got done diagnosing this one, and it has a bad tip on. The thing is, the cooling fan wouldn't come on, and they tried to bypass it with thermostatic switch, blew the head. They just put a head on it. They wanted to get it working, but I could get intermittent communication with some scan tools. Like my Actron would sometimes communicate, sometimes it wouldn't, and the factory scan tool could not communicate. The Mopar, the YTech module. So I went ahead and pinned into the CAN bus there, and I had both signals held at 2.5 volts, the high and the low, right? And so we decided we're going to start unplugging stuff. We started with the TIPM. We unplugged the CAN bus from the TIPM, comes back to life. I can communicate with all the other modules in the car. So we got a bad TIPM, and the TIPM controls the fan on these through the CAN bus. So that's how you generally do that. When you're not, test your voltages, right? Make sure those are all good. And then start going after the different buses. So some of these older global OBD2s don't necessarily talk CAN, they're talking on the old bus. But the newer scan tools and the factory scan tool need to be able to see that CAN bus. They weren't seeing the signal on them. So that's why we were getting the no comms and everything. But it's this TIPM. And these are just a big computer and transistors inside. It's basically the fuse box. But TIPM stands for Totally Integrated Power Module. And those things like to go bad. So it is what it is. Yeah, they're going to get another one. I'm going to come back and get it installed and set up for them. So, fun times. This is what I do on Saturdays. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. It's Tom, Frugal Prepper. So this is how the cooling fans work on a 2006 PT Cruiser. This is the diagram for it. I'm not sure about 05, but I know 04 and back uses a completely different methodology to control the fans direct from the computer, from the powertrain control. However, they use the TIPM on the 2006 and up, I'm assuming, but at least in this 2006. So when I got there, they said the fans don't work. They tried to check and see if they're getting any signal. They weren't. They had replaced the 2 relays that are in this on the fans. They had checked the power and ground, and that was good. And they also said when they turned on the air conditioning, the fans weren't coming on either. Assuming that the AC is working and that the compressor has enough pressure to turn everything on or whatever. So how does this work? And so the way this works is you have basically your temperature sensor here, and that's on the powertrain control module. And then you have your AC clutch signal, so when the AC clutch is on, it can come up here and tell it to turn on the fans. And this is the TIPM, the Totally Integrated Power Module. This is the new fuse box, but instead of having relays and stuff in it, it's all computer controlled circuitry in here. It's all transistors and stuff. And so you have your high speed and your low speed fan signals. Those come over here to low and high speed signals. I'm assuming since this is battery plus in, that this probably sends these 2 high to turn on the fans. I'm assuming, I don't know. Doesn't matter, I could have checked either one. And then there's a ground and a fused here. So after I verified that everything they told me was the case, I then went ahead and said, okay, we're going to go ahead and hook up the scan tool and the module, the Mopar YTech module. We're going to run DRB3, and we're going to go in and we're going to command this high. So first of all, how does this communication happen between the TIPM and this? This happens across the CAN bus. So it goes across this separate bus, and it tells it when to turn the fans on high and low for temperature. However, when it's turning it on for AC, it just goes through this wire to command it. So, you know, why it's not coming on for the AC, I don't know. Could be something in the TIPM. But my main concern was, why is it not coming on when this should be commanding it on? And so what you do is you go in here and you plug in with the factory scan tool, and you tell it, turn on the high-speed fans, and it should turn it on, and turn off the high-speed fans, it should turn it off. And whether that does it from the PCM communicating to this, or it does it directly talking to that module, I don't know. But when I went to plug in, no communication with the factory scan tool. And then my friend who had been working on this said, well, I had a scan tool on it the other day and it was working, and he was reading codes off of it. And so I went and got a cheaper scan tool, plugged that in. At first I had no communications. I discovered the connector was a little loose, plugged it in. I got it to talk. Man, it was talking slow. It was taking forever to ID the vehicle, but it eventually did it. And it would read the global OBD codes out of it. But I tried to get the scan tool that plugs into my phone that will talk CAN bus, and it would not communicate. And my factory scan tool would not communicate. So I said, I wonder what's going on. So after I checked all the powers and grounds, and I checked to make sure pins 4 and 5 had a ground, right? I checked to make sure that we had the power going here, and we did. And I also checked on pin, which one is it? One of these was supposed to be a hot one when the ignition was on, according to all data, right? And all data said, I think it was 8 was supposed to be hot for ignition, but then I printed out the one from Mitchell and it says it's not connected, so I didn't worry about that not being there. So I then got out the scope, set the scope up for a CAN low high signal through the automatic little setup things that they have in the Pico. You can go and say, I want to look for communications, CAN low high, and then I come down here and I go to the CAN high, which is right here, diagnostic CAN plus, the CAN low, which is diagnostic CAN negative. And those signals should be like 0 to 5 volts, and they should mirror each other. It might actually be 0 to 7 or something, but they should mirror each other, and you know, from negative to positive, right? And it should look like I showed you it looked like on the video there. But instead, they were both at 2.5 volts positive, both of them. And I'm like, well, that's not going to be an open in the circuit because they would have nothing on them. It's not going to be a short in the circuit because that would probably also show nothing or a very low signal, but I would still see something. That seems like it is a bad module. So we have to go through and start unplugging modules. Luckily, this car doesn't have a ton of modules. It's got a transmission control module. It's got an ABS module. It's got the TIPM, you know. And so I said, well, we know the TIPM isn't working right. We assume it's not working when it sees this signal. It's not working to turn on these fans. Let's unplug that. So we look up the connector that the CAN signal comes in on the TIPM. We unplug that guy. Boom, signal comes back. We got full CAN signal. Plug it back in, CAN signal goes away. Check powers and grounds to the TIPM, and everything's good. So we have a bad TIPM. So they're working to get one, and I'm going to go replace that. But that's how I diagnose that. You know, a TIPM's a pretty common failure on a Chrysler of that era. TIPMs are just one of the dumb things that Chrysler did, rather than just using some relays and having it all controlled from the PCM. But hey, it's what they did, and it's what you got to live with. There's no way to bypass around that because you have no controls coming out to the TIPM. You just have this communication on the CAN bus. So there's no way to really bypass that. Some things on the TIPM you can bypass, like fuel pumps and stuff like that. Fuel pump relays on some of them, you can wire in a separate relay because it's getting another signal wire into it. However, this is purely CAN bus communication. So hopefully that might help some people if they're having some problems with their cooling fans. They just cannot figure it out on a 06 and up PT Cruiser. It's this way on a lot of Chryslers. Hopefully that'll help. But that's how I arrived at that diagnosis. That was my process. And I'm sorry, I can't always film everything when I'm doing it in the days in these shops, because I'm there to get the problem fixed as soon as possible, move on to the next one and make money. And it's just not always real convenient to film. But I wanted, once we had found it, you know, before I cleaned up, I just kind of wanted to show you what I found, what I went through, and then I figure I can come back and talk about the diagnostic process I went through on the other end of that. I'll talk to y'all later. It's Tom, your Frugal Prepper.